History is often remembered through powerful empires that lasted centuries, but hidden beneath that narrative is a stranger pattern of states that rose and collapsed within hours. These so-called one-day empires emerged with flags, leaders, and declarations of sovereignty, only to vanish almost immediately under pressure, illusion, or force. From the smoke-filled halls of Russia's 1918 Constituent Assembly to a rebellion that succeeded by sneaking in with dairy cows, these fleeting nations expose how fragile legitimacy and power truly are. What you are about to hear is the story of history's most bizarre empires that barely lived long enough to be remembered. At number 1, the Russian Democratic Federative Republic stands as one of the most bizarre and heartbreaking one-day political entities in modern history, earning its place among history's shortest-lived empires by surviving for just 13 hours between the late afternoon of January 18, 1918, and the early morning of January 19th. Emerging directly from the chaos of the Russian Revolution, this republic was meant to replace the fallen Romanov dynasty and be governed by the All-Russian Constituent Assembly, the first genuinely democratic body ever elected in Russia. The November 1917 elections brought more than 44 million voters to the polls and introduced universal suffrage that included women, ethnic minorities, and religious groups, placing Russia ahead of many Western democracies of the era. However, this democratic mandate clashed directly with the Bolsheviks, who had already seized power during the October Revolution under Vladimir Lenin and viewed the assembly as a threat to their vision of a dictatorship of the proletariat. Inside Petrograd's Tauride Palace, over 700 delegates gathered in a tense atmosphere, many of them former political prisoners and exiles who had suffered under Tsarist rule. Outside the palace, Red Guard machine guns were trained on the entrances as winter winds swept through the streets. When the session opened at 4 in the afternoon, the Bolsheviks were already on the defensive, having secured only 22 to 25% of the vote compared to 40% for the Socialist Revolutionary Party. Throughout the night, the assembly passed sweeping legislation, including the socialization of land and the formal declaration of Russia as a democratic federative republic, even as armed sailors and soldiers heckled from the balconies. Exhaustion rather than violence brought the experiment to an end when sailor Anatoly Zheleznyakov calmly announced, "The Guard is tired," ordering the delegates to leave at 4 in the morning. When members returned hours later, artillery surrounded the building and the doors were sealed, ending Russia's brief democratic empire and ushering in a one-party state that would last for 70 years. Kicking things off at number 2, the Republic of Benin represents a bizarre 7-hour one-day empire born from desperation during the Nigerian Civil War, existing briefly between September 19th and the early hours of September 20th, 1967. This Republic of Benin, unrelated to the modern nation of the same name, was created as a puppet state by the Republic of Biafra after its forces captured Nigeria's Midwestern region in a rapid August offensive. The territory was ethnically diverse, containing both Igbo and non-Igbo populations, and Biafra hoped to use it as a strategic buffer against the advancing Nigerian federal military government. As federal troops launched a massive pincer movement toward Benin City, the situation became untenable, forcing Biafran administrator Major Dr. Albert Nwazu Okonkwo to attempt a last-minute political gamble. Rather than maintain an unpopular occupation, Okonkwo declared independence, hoping to win the loyalty of skeptical local communities. The proclamation was delivered not from a government building, but from a radio station filled with static and the distant thunder of artillery. Okonkwo, an American-educated physician turned military officer, announced the Republic of Benin as fully autonomous and sovereign, applied for membership in the United Nations and the Commonwealth, and pledged continued support for Biafra. The declaration was recorded during a brief lull in fighting, as retreat preparations were already underway. Although Okonkwo claimed the support of the Oba of Benin and the region's ethnic groups, reality told a different story, as many civilians openly welcomed the approaching federal troops. By the morning of September 20th, Nigerian forces entered Benin City, dissolving the republic almost as soon as it had been announced, leaving behind one of history's shortest-lived and most surreal one-day empires. Coming in at number 3, the Republic of Carpatho-Ukraine earns its place among history's strangest one-day empires with an existence that lasted less than 24 hours on March 15, 1939, during the collapse of Central Europe under Nazi expansion. Located in the remote Carpathian Mountains at the eastern edge of Czechoslovakia, this tiny state emerged from decades of nationalist ambition among the Rusin or Ruthenian population, seeking independence from both Czech and Hungarian control. After the Munich Agreement weakened Czechoslovakia and Slovakia declared independence under German protection on March 14th, leaders in the city of Hust realized they were dangerously exposed to an imminent Hungarian invasion. In a final act of political self-determination, the Carpatho-Ukrainian parliament convened on the morning of March 15th and unanimously declared independence. Augustin Voloshin was elected president, Ukrainian was named the state language, and the blue and yellow Ukrainian flag was adopted, even though less than 10% of the population was ethnically Hungarian. As these decisions were being made, Hungarian troops were already crossing the border. The Republic's only defense force, the Carpathian Sich, consisted of roughly 5,000 poorly armed volunteers facing 2 full Hungarian army divisions. Resistance was brief and hopeless. By nightfall, government leaders fled into exile, and by the following morning, the territory was fully annexed by Hungary, creating a strategic corridor between Romania and the remnants of Czechoslovakia. Despite its fleeting existence, Carpatho-Ukraine managed to issue a single commemorative postage stamp sold for less than 27 hours, leaving behind one tangible artifact of a nation that lived and died within a single day. Landing at number 4, the Sultanate of Zanzibar delivers one of the most astonishingly short-lived displays of sovereignty in world history, lasting just 38 minutes during the Anglo-Zanzibar War of August 1896, often remembered as the shortest war ever recorded. This bizarre confrontation began after the sudden and suspicious death of Sultan Hamad bin Thwani on August 25th, an event some contemporaries believed involved foul play by his cousin Khalid bin Bargash. Acting swiftly, Khalid seized the royal palace and proclaimed himself sultan without seeking approval from the British consul, a direct violation of the 1890 Protectorate Treaty that required British consent for any succession. Britain, determined to install a more compliant ruler, issued an ultimatum demanding that Khalid lower his flag and vacate the palace by 9 o'clock on the morning of August 27th. When Khalid refused, the British Empire prepared a brutal demonstration of gunboat diplomacy. His entire empire consisted of the palace itself and a single outdated yacht, the HHS Glasgow, a ceremonial gift once presented by Queen Victoria. In a moment of tragic defiance or complete miscalculation, the Glasgow opened fire on the heavily armed British cruiser HMS St. George, prompting a single devastating broadside that sank the yacht almost instantly. At 9:02, 3 British gunboats unleashed high-explosive shells on the wooden palace, which housed roughly 2,500 defenders. Within less than 40 minutes, 500 Zanzibaris were killed or wounded, while Britain suffered only 1 injured sailor. At 9:40, Khalid's flag was cut down, ending both the war and his reign simultaneously. In a final twist worthy of a political thriller, Khalid escaped through the palace gardens to the German consulate, where extradition laws protected him. The German Navy later sailed directly into the garden at high tide, allowing Khalid to step aboard without ever touching Zanzibari soil, bringing one of history's strangest micro-empires to a close. Sliding into number 5, the Republic of Catalonia of 1934 stands as a dramatic 10-hour balcony-born state that collapsed almost as quickly as it was proclaimed, unfolding during the political turmoil of Spain's Second Republic. On October 6, 1934, Catalan President Luis Companys reacted to the inclusion of right-wing CETA ministers in the Madrid government, a move the left-wing Generalitat interpreted as a step toward fascism. At 8 o'clock that evening, Campanz emerged onto the balcony of the Palau de la Generalitat in Barcelona and declared the formation of a Catalan state within the Spanish Federal Republic, claiming full governing authority in the name of the people. The declaration was flawed from the outset, as Spain was not a federal republic, rendering the proclamation legally meaningless from its first moment. Militarily, the effort was equally fragile. Campanz phoned General Domènec Batet, the local army commander, seeking his support, but Batet remained loyal to the central government and used the call to quietly mobilize his forces. As night fell, Spanish troops surrounded key government buildings, including the Generalitat and City Council. A brief exchange of gunfire followed, resulting in 46 deaths before Campanz surrendered at 6 o'clock the following morning. The consequences were severe and immediate. Catalonia's Statute of Autonomy was suspended. The entire Catalan government received 30-year prison sentences, and nearly 3,000 detainees were confined, many aboard the prison ship Uruguay, anchored in Barcelona harbor. Though fleeting, this 10-hour republic became a lasting symbol of Catalan nationalism, remembered as the Balkany Republic, where symbolic sovereignty was declared without the means to defend it. Coming in at number 6, the Republic of West Florida earns its place among bizarre near-one-day empires as a 74-day nation created for the sole purpose of being absorbed, making it one of the strangest success stories in North American political history. Formed in 1810, the Republic emerged from a rebellion by American and British settlers in the Baton Rouge district against ineffective Spanish rule. The so-called War for Independence began on the night of September 23rd, when a group led by Philemon Tomish, a grocery store owner turned rebel commander, launched a surprise assault on the Spanish fort at Baton Rouge. One of the most peculiar tactics in military history followed at dawn, when the rebels slipped into the fort disguised among a herd of dairy cows entering for morning milking. The Spanish garrison, consisting of only 28 soldiers and a governor reportedly bedridden with yellow fever, was overwhelmed in a 30-minute firefight. The rebels raised the Bonnie Blue flag, a white star on a blue field sewn by Melissa Johnson, and declared the independence of the state of West Florida. Operating from St. Francisville, the Republic adopted a constitution and elected Fulwar Skipwith as president, while urgently petitioning United States President James Madison for annexation. Madison, asserting the land belonged to the Louisiana Purchase of 1803, eventually sent Governor William Charles Cole Claiborne with troops and naval support. On December 10, 1810, the Lone Star was lowered and West Florida was absorbed into the United States, leaving behind its legacy as the original Lone Star State, decades before Texas claimed the title. Closing out at number 7, Emperor Norton I represents the most unconventional empire on this list, a 21-year reign sustained entirely by collective belief rather than force, transforming personal delusion into civic performance. Joshua Abraham Norton was once a wealthy businessman whose fortune collapsed after a failed attempt to monopolize the rice market in 1852. On September 17, 1859, he published a proclamation in the San Francisco Bulletin declaring himself Emperor of the United States and Protector of Mexico. Instead of dismissing him as insane, the citizens of San Francisco embraced Norton as a beloved public figure. He patrolled the streets in a blue military coat adorned with gold epaulets and wore a beaver hat decorated with peacock feathers, embodying his imperial role with complete sincerity. Norton issued eccentric yet often insightful decrees calling for the dissolution of Congress, banning the use of the word Frisco, and proposing a suspension bridge and tunnel connecting San Francisco to Oakland, ideas later realized as the Bay Bridge and Transbay Tube. Restaurants fed him freely, theaters reserved seats in his honor, and local businesses accepted the imperial currency he printed himself. His sovereignty was publicly defended in 1867 when a police officer arrested him for vagrancy, sparking public outrage that forced the police chief to apologize and order officers to salute the emperor. Norton's empire existed purely through performance and goodwill, demonstrating that authority can arise from shared belief. When he died in 1880, nearly 30,000 people attended his funeral, mourning a man who ruled not by power, but by kindness, imagination, and communal respect. These bizarre one-day empires reveal that sovereignty is not just written into law, but performed through belief, symbols, and power, and it collapses the moment those elements disappear. From exhausted guards and imaginary emperors to flags raised without armies to defend them, these fleeting states show how fragile borders truly are. If you enjoyed exploring the strangest empires history almost forgot, comment your thoughts below, like the video, and subscribe for more deep dives into the forgotten corners of history. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.